Ashanti came to Seoul chasing K-drama fantasies of coffee shop meet cuties and chaebol princes, armed with nothing but optimism and a tourist visa. What she found instead was in Woo-jin, Seoul's most dangerous crime lord, standing over a body in an alley she'd wandered into by mistake, blood on his expensive suit, death in his dark eyes. Their gazes locked for 3 impossible seconds, and something ancient and inevitable shifted in his chest, a recognition that felt like destiny wrapped in catastrophe, like his soul had been searching for her across lifetimes and would burn the world down before letting her walk away. Welcome to Afro-Korean romance stories, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. Woo-jin had killed 17 men in his 32 years, had built an empire on violence and fear, had learned early that mercy was weakness and attachment was liability. But none of that prepared him for the moment a curvy African woman with wide, terrified eyes stumbled into his crime scene, her presence shattering his carefully maintained control, awakening something he'd thought dead. The capacity to care whether someone looked at him with horror or understanding, the desperate need to make her see him as something other than monster. The body at his feet was still warm, the kill fresh enough that steam rose from pooling blood in Gangnam's winter air. His men flanked him with weapons drawn, awaiting orders to eliminate the witness, to ensure silence through the only method their world understood. But Woo-jin raised one hand, halting them, his attention fixed entirely on the woman frozen in the alley's entrance, her phone clutched in trembling fingers, her expression cycling through shock and terror and something else, fascination, maybe, or recognition of danger that should have sent her running but instead held her paralyzed. "You shouldn't be here," Woo-jin said in English, his accent thick but clear, his voice rougher than intended. "This neighborhood isn't safe for tourists after dark." Ashanti's mouth opened and closed without sound, her mind struggling to process the surreal nightmare she'd stumbled into. She'd been looking for a convenience store, had taken a wrong turn away from the well-lit shopping district, had followed her phone's GPS into progressively darker streets until she'd ended up here, witnessing murder, facing down a man who radiated danger like heat from pavement, feeling her K-drama fantasies shatter into something far more complicated and terrifying. I was lost," she finally managed, her voice thin with fear. "I didn't see anything. I'll just go. I won't tell anyone. Please." The plea in her tone did something to Woo-jin's chest, something painful and unwelcome. Most people who stumbled into his world either knew who he was and cowered with practiced terror, or didn't know and died before understanding their mistake. This woman was different, American, judging by her accent, probably here as a tourist or English teacher, completely out of her depth but somehow still standing instead of running, still meeting his eyes instead of looking away. "It's too late for that," he said quietly, stepping over the body with casual disregard, moving toward her with predatory grace. "You've seen my face. You've seen this. I can't let you walk away." Later that night, after Woo-jin's men had cleaned the scene with professional efficiency, after the body had been disposed of through channels Ashanti didn't want to understand, she found herself in the back of a luxury sedan, flanked by silent guards, being driven through Seoul's glittering streets toward an unknown destination. Her phone had been confiscated, her protests ignored, her attempts to explain that she was nobody, that she posed no threat, met with impassive silence. The car pulled into an underground garage beneath a building that looked like it belonged in architectural magazines, all glass and steel and sharp modern angles reaching toward the night sky. They escorted her into a private elevator, up 50 floors, into a penthouse that screamed wealth and power and dangerous sophistication. Woo-jin waited there, changed out of his blood-stained suit into black slacks and a white shirt, looking less like a killer and more like a CEO, though the darkness in his eyes remained unchanged. "Sit," he instructed, gesturing to a sofa that probably cost more than Ashanti's yearly salary. "We need to talk about your situation." "My situation?" she repeated, anger finally breaking through shock. "You mean my kidnapping? I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just a teacher. I've been in Seoul for 3 weeks. I don't know anything about your business. I just want to go home." "Home to where?" Woo-jin asked, settling into a chair across from her, his posture relaxed but his attention absolute. "Atlanta, according to your passport. Teaching English at a hagwon in Gangnam. Living in a shared apartment in Mapo. Single, no family in Korea, tourist visa that expires in 5 months. The casual recitation of her personal information made Ashanti's blood run cold. How do you know all that? I make it my business to know everything about potential problems, he said simply. You saw something tonight that could destroy me if reported to the wrong people. That makes you either a threat or an asset. I need to determine which. The following morning, Ashanti woke in a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment, decorated in masculine minimalism. The bed beneath her more comfortable than anything she'd ever experienced. For a disoriented moment, she thought the previous night had been some fever dream, some jet lag-induced nightmare. Then reality crashed back. The body, the blood, the man with dark eyes who looked at her like she was simultaneously dangerous and precious. A woman appeared in the doorway, professional and polite, carrying a tray with breakfast and clothes. Miss Williams, I'm Secretary Kim. Mr. M asked me to ensure your comfort. The clothes are in your size. Breakfast is traditional Korean, but I can arrange Western food if you prefer. Mr. M will meet with you this afternoon to discuss your arrangements. Arrangements for what? Ashanti asked, her voice sharper than intended. For my release? For letting me go back to my actual life. Secretary Kim's expression remained neutral. That's between you and Mr. M. But I'd advise cooperation. He's not a patient man, but he's also not unnecessarily cruel. Your situation could be much worse. By the end of the week, Ashanti had learned several things about her new reality. First, Woo-jin was not just wealthy. He was powerful in ways that made traditional wealth look insignificant, his influence extending through Seoul's business and criminal networks like roots through soil, his name carrying weight that made people bow and hurry to obey. Second, her protective custody, as Woo-jin insisted on calling it, was unfortunately necessary because witnesses to his activities had a way of disappearing, and several rival factions would love to get their hands on information about his operations, even secondhand information from a terrified American teacher who'd seen too much. Third, and most disturbingly, Woo-jin visited her every single evening without fail. He didn't come to intimidate or threaten, though his presence was inherently intimidating. He came to talk, to ask about her life in Atlanta, to learn about her family and her dreams and her reasons for coming to Korea. He brought books when Secretary Kim mentioned Ashanti missed reading in English, ordered food from restaurants she mentioned craving, arranged for art supplies after noticing her sketching on paper scraps. I don't understand you, Ashanti admitted one evening as they shared Chinese takeout on the penthouse's balcony, souls spreading below them in infinite lights. You're keeping me prisoner, but you're treating me like a guest. You're a criminal, but you ask about my day like we're friends. You're terrifying, but you bring me books. I'm not keeping you prisoner, Woo-jin corrected quietly. I'm keeping you alive. There's a difference. Is there? Ashanti challenged. Because I can't leave. I can't contact my friends. I can't go back to my job or my apartment or my actual life. That sounds like prison to me. Prison would be letting you walk out that door and watching you die within 48 hours, Woo-jin said, his voice hard with something that sounded like fear. The Kim faction has been watching your hagwon. The Park Syndicate put a price on information about that alley. You think I'm your captor? I'm your only protection against people who'd torture you for days before killing you just to send me a message. The truth of it settled between them like ice water. Ashanti had been trying not to think about the danger, had been focusing on her anger at being taken, had been nursing her resentment about lost freedom. But Woo-jin's blunt assessment forced her to confront reality. She'd witnessed something that made her a target, and walking away wouldn't change that, would only make her vulnerable. How long, she whispered. How long until it's safe? I don't know, Woo-jin admitted. Weeks, maybe months. Until I've eliminated the threats or convinced my enemies that you're more valuable alive than dead. A few days later, everything shifted again. Ashanti was reading in what she'd started thinking of as her room when Woo-jin entered without knocking, his expression tight with barely controlled emotion. There's a gala tomorrow night. Business event at the Shilla Hotel. I need you to attend with me. She looked up, confused. Why would you want me at a business event? Because rumors are spreading that I've taken an African woman as a mistress, he said bluntly. My enemies are using it to suggest I'm weak, distracted, vulnerable. I need to show them you're under my protection by choice, not force. That you're an asset, not a liability. I'm not your mistress, Ashanti said flatly. I know that, Woo-jin's jaw clenched. But they don't. And the speculation is causing problems. If you appear with me publicly, looking willing and content, it sends a different message. It says I'm confident enough to bring he paused, searching for words, my connection into the open. The next evening, Ashanti found herself being prepared for the gala by a team of professionals who descended on the penthouse like a tactical unit. Hair, makeup, wardrobe, they transformed her with efficient precision, choosing a gown in deep emerald that hugged her curves with elegant certainty, that made her dark skin glow, that was clearly expensive enough to belong in Woo-jin's world. When she finally saw herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the sophisticated woman staring back. Woo-jin's reaction when he saw her was visceral and immediate. His expression transformed from professional assessment to something raw and hungry, his eyes darkening as they traced her curves, his hands clenching at his sides like he was physically restraining himself from touching her. You're beautiful, he said roughly. Devastating. Every man at that gala is going to want you, and I'm going to have to resist killing them for looking. The possessiveness in his tone made something flutter in Ashanti's stomach, something dangerous and exciting. You don't own me, she reminded him, but her voice lacked conviction. Not yet, he agreed, moving closer, his presence overwhelming in the intimacy of the moment. But I will. Eventually. When you understand what you mean to me. When you stop fighting what's inevitable between us. The gala was exactly as intimidating as Ashanti had imagined. Seoul's elite gathered in glittering finery, conducting business disguised as pleasure, forming alliances wrapped in polite conversation. Woo-jin moved through it with practiced ease, one hand settled possessively at her lower back, introducing her to important people whose names she immediately forgot, his presence simultaneously protective and claiming. But it was the whispers she noticed most. Korean conversations she couldn't follow completely, judgmental looks from women in designer dresses, speculative glances from men in expensive suits. She didn't need translation to understand the gossip, to feel the weight of their disapproval, to recognize that she was being evaluated and found wanting by people who thought she didn't belong in Woo-jin's world. Later that night, everything came to a head when a man approached them at the champagne fountain, speaking to Woo-jin in rapid Korean before turning to Ashanti with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. So this is the African woman everyone's talking about, he said in accented English. I can see the appeal. Very exotic. Very different from Korean women. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Woo-jin's hand tightened on Ashanti's waist, his expression transforming into something cold and lethal. Careful, Park, he said quietly in Korean, though Ashanti could hear the threat underneath. Insult what's mine, and I'll take it as a declaration of war. Park left, apparently not reading the danger correctly. Come now, we're all friends here. I'm simply commenting on your, he paused deliberately, unusual taste in companions. Though I suppose variety is exciting. If you ever tire of her, perhaps. He didn't finish the sentence. Woo-jin moved with lightning speed, his hand closing around Park's throat, slamming him against a nearby pillar with enough force to crack marble. The entire ballroom went silent, everyone turning to witness the violence barely leashed in Woo-jin's expression. She's not a toy to be passed around, Woo-jin said, his voice deadly quiet. She's not a curiosity for your entertainment. She's under my protection, which means she's untouchable. Speak of her disrespectfully again, and I'll remove your tongue and feed it to you. Do you understand me? The following morning, Ashanti woke to find Woo-jin sitting in a chair beside her bed, still wearing his tuxedo from the gala, his expression haunted. I'm sorry, he said before she could speak. For the spectacle. For exposing you to that environment. For losing control when Park. He stopped, jaw clenching. You don't belong in my world. You're too good for the darkness I inhabit. Then let me go, Ashanti said softly. Let me return to my safe, boring life where the most dangerous thing I encounter is kimchi that's too spicy. I can't. Woo-jin's voice was raw. Even if it were safe, which it isn't, I can't let you go. You've become, he stopped, searching for words. You've become essential. The thought of you walking away, of never seeing you again, of not knowing if you're safe and happy, it's unbearable. That's not love, Ashanti said, though her heart raced at his words. That's obsession. Maybe, he agreed. But it's the only thing I'm capable of. I don't know how to care about someone without wanting to lock them away from everything that could hurt them. I don't know how to love without possession. By the end of the month, the lines between captor and captive had blurred beyond recognition. Woo-jin still wouldn't let Ashanti leave, but her confinement had evolved into something more complex. Shared meals and long conversations, movie nights where he introduced her to Korean cinema, mornings where she'd find him working in his home office, and they'd end up debating everything from politics to philosophy. She was learning Korean from him, the language lessons becoming intimate in ways neither acknowledged, their hands touching over vocabulary lists, their faces close while he corrected her pronunciation. The attraction between them was becoming undeniable and overwhelming. Small touches lingered too long. Casual glances held too much heat. Accidental contact in confined spaces sparked awareness that neither could ignore. Ashanti found herself noticing everything about him. The way his hair fell across his forehead when he was concentrating, the rare genuine smile that transformed his face, the gentleness in his hands despite their capacity for violence. One evening, the tension finally broke. They'd been arguing about something insignificant, whether she should be allowed to contact her family, when suddenly they were kissing instead of arguing, his mouth on hers with desperate hunger, his hands tangling in her hair, her body pressed against the wall with his solid presence surrounding her. The kiss was everything, explosive and claiming, tender and fierce, months of denied attraction finally finding release. What followed was inevitable, a night where boundaries dissolved and they learned each other thoroughly, where Woo-jin proved with devastating attention that he'd been imagining this for weeks, where Ashanti discovered that danger and desire were closer than she'd ever imagined. He worshipped her curves with reverent intensity, made her feel beautiful and wanted and precious, showed her that his obsession was matched by genuine care. The following morning brought complications neither had anticipated. Ashanti woke wrapped in Woo-jin's arms, feeling claimed and cherished and terrified all at once. What they'd done had changed everything, had transformed their dynamic from captor and captive into something far more dangerous. Lovers bound by attraction and circumstance, by protection and possession, by feelings neither could deny but both feared to acknowledge fully. "I can't do this," Ashanti said, pulling away from his embrace. "I can't be your mistress or your prisoner or whatever this is. I came to Korea for adventure, not to fall in love with a criminal who keeps me locked in a tower." "You're not in a tower," Woo-jin said roughly. "You're in the safest place in Seoul. And you're not my mistress, you're the woman I'm falling in love with despite knowing better." A few days later, Ashanti made her escape attempt. She'd been planning it carefully, studying the security patterns, identifying weak points in coverage, waiting for the perfect opportunity. It came when Woo-jin had an emergency meeting that pulled him away from the penthouse, when Secretary Kim was distracted with deliveries, when the guards were changing shifts with that brief moment of transition chaos. She made it to the street level, out into Seoul's overwhelming crowds, freedom so close she could taste it. But she only got 2 blocks before a van pulled up beside her, doors sliding open, hands grabbing her before she could scream. The last thing she saw before a cloth pressed over her face and consciousness fled was Woo-jin's penthouse disappearing behind her, and the terrifying realization that he'd been right. She wasn't safe without his protection, and her desire for freedom had just delivered her to his enemies. She woke in darkness, her head pounding, her hands zip-tied behind her back. Voices spoke in Korean nearby, male and hostile, their tones carrying casual cruelty. A door opened, fluorescent light stabbing her eyes, revealing a man whose face she'd seen briefly at the gala, Park, the one Woo-jin had threatened, his expression holding triumph and vindictive satisfaction. "The African woman," Park said in English. "I'm Woo-jin's weakness finally revealed. Do you know how long we've waited for him to care about something other than power? And then you appeared, making him soft, making him vulnerable, making him human enough to hurt." The following hours blurred into nightmare. They didn't hurt her physically, apparently. She was more valuable undamaged. But the psychological torture was effective. They described in detail what they'd do when Woo-jin inevitably came for her, how they'd use her to destroy him, how loving her was his fatal mistake. They showed her surveillance photos of Woo-jin's increasingly desperate search, his organization mobilized with single-minded focus, his reputation crumbling as word spread that he'd lost control over one woman. Meanwhile, across Seoul, Woo-jin had transformed into something his enemies had only glimpsed before: pure controlled violence, strategic brutality, the monster he'd been hiding beneath civilized veneer. He'd mobilized his entire network within an hour of discovering Ashanti's escape, had pulled resources from every business, had called in every favor accumulated over 15 years of building his empire. "She's with the Park faction," his second-in-command reported after 6 hours of intelligence gathering. Holding facility in Incheon. Park sent a video. He hesitated before showing his phone, the footage making Woo-jin's blood run ice cold. Ashanti, bound and terrified, Park's hand in her hair, threats spoken in Korean that promised suffering. "Mobilize everyone," Woo-jin said, his voice deadly calm. "I want that facility surrounded within an hour. I want Park alive. He dies slowly for touching her. Everyone else is expendable. Burn it to the ground if necessary, but bring her home safely." The assault on the Incheon facility was coordinated chaos, Woo-jin's forces attacking from multiple angles, overwhelming Park security through superior numbers and tactical precision. Woo-jin led from the front, personally clearing rooms with methodical violence, leaving bodies in his wake, his focus locked entirely on reaching Ashanti before Park could make good on his threats. He found her in a storage room, still bound but conscious, her eyes widening with relief when she saw him. Park was there too, holding a knife too close to her throat, his expression desperate. "Stay back, one more step and I..." He never finished the threat. Woo-jin's shot was precise, disabling Park's knife hand, making him scream and stumble backward. Then Woo-jin was there, cutting Ashanti's bonds, checking her for injuries with hands that trembled despite his usual control, his expression cycling through relief and fury and something that looked like devastation. "I'm sorry," he said roughly, pulling her against his chest. "I should have protected you better. Should have anticipated this. Should have never let you out of my sight." Later that night, after Ashanti had been examined by doctors and declared physically unharmed, after Park had been dealt with through methods she didn't ask about, she and Woo-jin faced each other in his penthouse's living room, tension thick between them. "I can't do this," Ashanti said, her voice breaking. "I can't be the reason you lose control. I can't live in constant fear that someone will use me against you. This isn't the life I wanted." "Then what life do you want?" Woo-jin challenged. "Safe and boring in Atlanta? Teaching English to children while pretending you didn't feel what we felt together? Walking away from this thing between us because it's dangerous and complicated?" "Yes," she whispered. "Exactly that. I want normal. I want safe. I want to wake up without wondering if today's the day someone kidnaps me to hurt you." "I'll make you a deal," Woo-jin said, his voice rough with desperation. "Give me 3 months. 3 months to eliminate the threats, to secure my position, to make it safe for you to exist in my world. If I can't do that, if you still want to leave after seeing me try, I'll put you on a plane to Atlanta myself with enough money to start over, to forget me, to build the boring safe life you think you want." The following weeks were surreal, watching Woo-jin systematically dismantle his enemies with strategic precision. He was ruthless but calculated, eliminating threats through a combination of violence and politics, absorbing rival territories, making examples of those who'd targeted Ashanti. She watched him transform from the man who brought her books into something colder and more terrifying, watched him wade through blood to build safety around her, watched him prove that his obsession was backed by absolute capability. But he also proved other things. He started teaching her self-defense, refusing to leave her vulnerable again. He introduced her to his inner circle, his most trusted people, making clear that insulting her meant insulting him. He bought property in her name, established bank accounts she controlled, gave her resources that meant freedom if she chose to use them. He was building her a cage made of gold and genuine care, and Ashanti couldn't decide if she wanted to escape or sink deeper into the dangerous comfort he offered. One evening, 6 weeks into their 3-month agreement, Woo-jin came home later than usual, exhausted and blood-spattered, collapsing onto the sofa beside her. "It's done," he said quietly. "The Park faction is finished. The Kin Syndicate has agreed to peace terms. The Japanese Yakuza who were sniffing around have been convinced that you're off limits. You're safe now. As safe as anyone can be in my world. Safe in your world, Ashanti repeated. But never safe from your world. Never able to live normally. Always looking over my shoulder. Always wondering when the next threat appears. Yes, Woo-jin admitted. That's the reality. That's the cost of loving me. But I can offer you other things, protection, devotion, anything you want that money or power can provide. I can give you a life most people only dream about. I just can't give you normal. That night, Ashanti made her choice. She kissed him, the gesture conveying what words couldn't: acceptance, surrender, commitment despite reason. She was choosing the dangerous man over the safe life, the complicated reality over the simple fantasy, the love that terrified her over the loneliness that would haunt her if she walked away. What followed was different from their first time together, slower and more deliberate, a claiming that felt like covenant rather than conquest. Woo-jin loved her with devastating thoroughness, proved with actions that she was precious beyond measure, showed her that his obsession had deepened into something more sustainable and genuine. She gave herself to him completely, no longer fighting the inevitable, no longer pretending she could walk away unscathed. The following morning brought news that shifted everything again. Secretary Kim appeared with unusual urgency, her expression grave. Mr. M, there's a situation. Your father is here. He's demanding to meet Miss Williams. Woo-jin's expression went carefully blank, a reaction that immediately made Ashanti nervous. He'd never mentioned his father, had avoided all discussion of family, had built his empire apparently independent of parental influence. The fact that his father was suddenly demanding an audience suggested complications Ashanti hadn't anticipated. Im Taeyong entered the penthouse like he owned it, which he probably once had, his presence commanding despite his age. He looked like an older version of Woo-jin, same sharp features, same cold eyes, same aura of controlled danger. He examined Ashanti with open disapproval, speaking in rapid Korean that she couldn't follow but whose tone was unmistakably hostile. English, father, Woo-jin said coldly. Ashanti deserves to understand your objections. Very well. Taeyong switched languages with practiced ease. This girl is a liability. An African woman with no connections, no power, no value to our organization. You're risking everything we built for what? Infatuation? Sexual attraction? She's not suitable for the future heir of the Im family. She's not suitable, or she's not Korean? Ashanti asked quietly, finding her voice despite intimidation. Taeyong's expression didn't change. Both. You're not one of us. You'll never understand our world, our culture, our way of operating. You're a distraction that's already cost my son reputation and resources. The sooner he ends this, the better for everyone. I'm not ending anything, Woo-jin said flatly. Ashanti stays. She's under my protection, and your approval is neither required nor relevant. The argument that followed was conducted in Korean, rapid-fire and clearly heated, father and son facing off with escalating tension. Ashanti couldn't understand the words, but she understood the dynamics. Taeyong demanding compliance, Woo-jin refusing, the conflict building towards some kind of ultimatum she couldn't quite grasp. Finally, Taeyong switched back to English, his expression cold with finality. Then you choose her over family, over legacy, over everything I built for you. Consider yourself disowned, Woo-jin. The Im organization will not support this relationship. After he left, Woo-jin stood at the window overlooking Seoul, his shoulders tight with tension. Ashanti approached carefully, her hand finding his arm. I'm sorry. I never meant to cause problems with your family. My father is a relic, Woo-jin said quietly. He built his empire on old prejudices and outdated traditions. I've been planning to break from him for years. You're just the catalyst that finally forced the issue. A few days later, the consequences of that break became apparent. Woo-jin's organization fractured, older members loyal to his father peeling away, taking resources and territory with them. Younger members remained loyal to Woo-jin, but the sudden division left him vulnerable in ways he hadn't been since establishing his power. His enemies immediately moved to exploit the weakness, launching coordinated attacks on his remaining holdings, testing his resolve, probing for opportunities to finally destroy him. Through it all, Woo-jin refused to blame Ashanti, refused to suggest that choosing her had been a mistake, refused to consider sending her away for strategic advantage. Instead, he worked 18-hour days rebuilding his fractured empire, making new alliances, proving that his power didn't depend on his father's legacy. And every night, regardless of how exhausted or stressed, he came home to her, found solace in her presence, drew strength from her steady support. "You should leave," he told her one evening, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Go to Atlanta. Let me handle this mess without worrying about your safety. Come back when things settle." "No," Ashanti said simply. "I'm not running when things get hard. I'm not abandoning you because your father's prejudice created problems. I chose you, Woo-jin. That means staying." The following month brought escalating violence as Woo-jin's enemies pressed their advantage. Car bombs, assassination attempts, coordinated attacks on his businesses. The warfare was brutal and unrelenting. Ashanti lived in constant fear, watching him leave each morning wondering if he'd return, seeing the toll the conflict took on him, understanding that her presence complicated his strategic options in ways that could get him killed. One evening, she made a decision. She packed a bag while Woo-jin was at a meeting, left a note explaining that she was returning to Atlanta not because she didn't love him, but precisely because she did, that she refused to be the weakness his enemies exploited, that he needed to focus on survival without worrying about protecting her. She made it to the airport, through security, to her gate before Woo-jin caught her. He appeared like a storm, his security detail clearing civilians, his expression holding fury and desperation in equal measure. "You were leaving," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Without saying goodbye. Without giving me a chance to convince you to stay." "I was leaving to save you," Ashanti corrected, tears streaming down her face. "Your father was right. I'm a liability. I'm the weakness your enemies use against you. You can't fight a war and protect me simultaneously." "You're not a weakness," Woo-jin said roughly, his hands framing her face with desperate gentleness. "You're my reason for fighting. You're what makes winning matter. You're the future I'm trying to build from the ashes of my father's empire." The airport security was watching nervously, uncertain how to handle a situation clearly involving powerful people. Woo-jin ignored them completely, his focus locked entirely on Ashanti. "Come home," he said. "Not because you're obligated, not because you're afraid of what I'll do if you leave, but because you choose me despite everything. Because we're stronger together than apart." Later that night, back at the penthouse, they faced each other with raw honesty finally unavoidable. "I love you," Ashanti admitted, the words terrifying but necessary. "I love you in ways that scare me, that make me reckless, that override every logical reason I should run. But love isn't always enough. Sometimes love means letting go. And sometimes love means fighting," Woo-jin countered. "Fighting against circumstances and prejudice and everyone who says we can't work. Fighting for the future we want instead of accepting the one others think we deserve." He pulled out a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a ring that was both elegant and unmistakably expensive. "Marry me. Not someday, not after things settle. Now immediately, before you can talk yourself out of it again. Marry me and prove that choosing each other matters more than choosing safety." The wedding happened within a week, small and private, officiated by a judge who owed Woo-jin favors. Ashanti wore a simple white dress purchased that morning, her natural hair styled in elegant braids, her smile genuine despite the chaos surrounding them. Woo-jin wore a dark suit and an expression that transformed him from fearsome crime lord into devoted husband, his vows simple but absolute, to protect, honor, and love her regardless of consequences. His remaining organization attended, their loyalty strengthened by witnessing their boss choose love over strategic advantage, choose permanence over convenience, choose an African woman over Korean tradition. The ceremony was both ending and beginning, the conclusion of their complicated courtship, the start of partnership that would reshape Woo-jin's empire around principles his father would never understand. The following months brought continued conflict but also transformation. Woo-jin systematically rebuilt his organization with people loyal to his vision rather than his father's, attracting younger members drawn to his willingness to break tradition, building power structures that valued competence over bloodline. It was slower growth than he'd enjoyed under his father's protection, but it was sustainable and genuinely his. Ashanti found her place in his world gradually, not as decoration or liability, but as genuine partner. She started teaching Korean to foreign workers in his legitimate businesses, bridging cultural gaps, helping integrate the international connections his father had rejected. She became involved in the charitable foundations he established, using his money to build schools and medical clinics in underserved areas. She proved that being Woo-jin's wife meant more than standing beside him. It meant helping him become better than his inheritance. 1 year after their wedding, Ashanti discovered she was pregnant. The news came with complicated emotions: joy at the child they'd created, fear about bringing new life into Woo-jin's dangerous world, anxiety about whether their love could sustain the pressures of parenthood added to everything else they faced. She told him over dinner, simply and directly, watching his expression transform through shock into something that looked like reverence. "A baby," he said roughly, his hand moving to her still flat stomach with infinite gentleness. "Our child. Proof that something good can come from darkness. Evidence that love is stronger than bloodlines and tradition, and every reason this shouldn't work." The pregnancy progressed normally, despite Ashanti's concerns about stress. Woo-jin's protection, already obsessive, became even more intense, his attention to her health and safety bordering on comical. He interviewed doctors for weeks before selecting one, established protocols for emergency situations, modified his home and office to accommodate her changing needs. He attended every appointment, asked detailed questions, studied pregnancy books with the same intensity he applied to business. His organization responded to news of the pregnancy with surprising enthusiasm. Many of his younger members had grown up in his reformed syndicate, had witnessed his transformation from his father's heir into something different, had invested in his vision of power that didn't require pure Korean bloodlines. The idea of an heir who represented Woo-jin's break from tradition, who symbolized his commitment to changing the old ways, appealed to them deeply. But not everyone celebrated. Im Taeyong, learning of his son's impending fatherhood through the gossip networks he still maintained, made one last attempt at intervention. He appeared at the penthouse unannounced, his expression colder than before, his demands clear: divorce Ashanti, send her back to America, marry someone suitable, pretend the pregnancy never happened. "The child will be mongrel," Taeyong said with brutal honesty. "Half Korean, half African, acceptable to no one. It will face prejudice its entire life. You're condemning your own child to suffering because you're too weak to make hard choices." What happened next was swift and final. Woo-jin physically removed his father from the penthouse, his control finally snapping, his hands around the older man's collar as he spoke in Korean too rapid and harsh for Ashanti to follow. But she didn't need translation to understand. This was the end. The final break, the moment when Woo-jin chose his chosen family over his blood family irreversibly. After his father left for the last time, Woo-jin returned to find Ashanti sitting on the sofa, her hand on her stomach, tears streaming down her face. "He's right," she whispered. "Our child will face prejudice. We'll never be fully accepted by Koreans or Africans. We'll grow up between worlds, belonging nowhere." "Our child," Woo-jin said fiercely, kneeling before her, "will grow up surrounded by love. We'll learn 3 languages. We'll have the best education and opportunities. We'll understand that being between worlds means having twice the heritage, twice the strength, twice the richness. We'll know that their parents chose love over convention, that their existence is proof that impossible things can work." The remaining months of pregnancy were remarkably peaceful despite their turbulent history. Woo-jin had successfully rebuilt his empire into something sustainable, had eliminated or neutralized most threats, had established himself as power independent of his father's legacy. Ashanti had established herself in Seoul's expatriate community, had built friendships with other women navigating intercultural marriages, had found balance between Korean expectations and her own American identity. When their daughter arrived, tiny and perfect and screaming with impressive lung capacity, Woo-jin held her with trembling hands, tears streaming down his face with complete unself-consciousness. She had Ashanti's beautiful dark skin and features that blended both parents into something uniquely hers. He spoke to her in Korean and English alternately, making promises about protection and love, about the world he'd build for her, about the legacy she'd inherit that had nothing to do with violence and everything to do with choosing right over easy. The following years brought continued challenges and surprises. Woo-jin's organization fully transitioned into legitimate business, maintaining just enough strategic connections to ensure protection without engaging in activities he couldn't explain to his daughter. Ashanti's art career, something she'd pursued as a hobby, gained international recognition, her paintings exploring themes of cultural collision and chosen family resonating with global audiences. Their daughter grew up bilingual and bicultural, navigating Korean kindergartens and American cultural centers with equal ease, learning early that her mixed heritage was strength rather than confusion. She was beautiful and confident and loved, proof that Taeyong's prejudice was wrong, that chosen family could be stronger than blood, that love could indeed conquer tradition and fear and every logical reason it shouldn't work. By their 5th anniversary, they'd built something that looked nothing like the life Ashanti had imagined when she came to Seoul chasing K-drama fantasies. It was better and harder, more complicated and more rewarding, darker and brighter simultaneously. She hadn't found a chaebol prince in a coffee shop. She'd stumbled into an alley and found a monster who became a man, who transformed his empire because she made him want to be worthy of her courage. The anniversary celebration was private, just the two of them after their daughter was asleep, sitting on the balcony overlooking Seoul's infinite lights. "Do you regret it?" Woo-jin asked quietly. "Coming to Korea? Getting lost in that alley? All the danger and chaos that followed." "Every day," Ashanti admitted, then smiled at his expression. "I regret every day before I met you. Every moment I existed without understanding what love could be. Every second I spent imagining a safe, boring life instead of knowing this terrifying, beautiful reality we built together. I love you," he said simply. "More than I thought possible. More than I knew I was capable of. You transformed me from my father's son into something better." "We transformed each other," she corrected. "I came to Korea thinking love meant cute meet-cuties and romantic gestures. You taught me love means choosing someone despite danger, means standing beside them when walking away would be easier, means building something good from impossibility." Their daughter interrupted the moment, appearing on the balcony in her pajamas, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Why aren't you sleeping?" Woo-jin asked, scooping her up. "I had a dream," she said in Korean, then switched to English. "About Grandpa, the mean one who doesn't visit." The mention of Taeyong still stung, his continued rejection of his granddaughter an open wound Woo-jin carried despite his public indifference. But before he could respond, his phone buzzed with an unexpected message. His expression shifted as he read it, something between surprise and cautious hope. "What is it?" Ashanti asked. "My father," Woo-jin said slowly. "He's asking to meet. To see his granddaughter. He says." He paused, his voice rough with emotion he was trying to control. "He says he was wrong. That watching her grow up through photos he shouldn't have but obtained anyway made him realize that bloodline matters less than love. That he wants to know her before he's too old to make amends." The meeting, when it finally happened, was awkward and emotional and imperfect. Taeyong, older and frilier than Ashanti remembered, looked at his granddaughter with expression that cycled through regret and wonder. He spoke to her in Korean, asking about her favorite things, listening to her chatter about school and friends and art projects. He apologized to Ashanti in stiff formal English, admitting that prejudice had cost him 5 years with his family. He never fully accepted their unconventional marriage, never completely understood Woo-jin's reformed empire, never stopped being uncomfortable with how much his son had changed from the heir he'd raised. But he tried, showed up for birthday parties, sent gifts on holidays, built relationship with his granddaughter that was genuine if complicated. It wasn't perfect reconciliation, but it was progress. By their 10th anniversary, Seoul had become genuinely home for Ashanti in ways she'd never imagined possible. She navigated the city with confident familiarity, spoke Korean fluently if not perfectly, understood cultural nuances, had built network of friends and professional connections. She was no longer the lost tourist who'd stumbled into an alley. She was Woo-jin's wife, respected artist, bridge between cultures, proof that belonging wasn't about bloodline but about choosing to belong. Woo-jin had also transformed, his empire now entirely legitimate. His reputation shifted from feared crime lord to innovative businessman, his name associated with charitable works and cultural initiatives rather than violence. The journey had cost him his father's legacy and traditional power structures, but given him something more valuable: ability to be proud of what he'd built, to explain his work to his daughter without shame, to sleep peacefully knowing his wealth came from creation rather than destruction. Their daughter, now 10, was everything they'd hoped she'd become: confident and kind, brilliant and compassionate, comfortable in her mixed heritage, fluent in 3 languages, aware that her existence represented parents who'd chosen love over convenience. She understood her father's past without being defined by it, knew her parents' story without being burdened by it, was being raised to believe that love conquered all obstacles if people fought hard enough. That evening, at quiet dinner celebrating their anniversary, Woo-jin raised his glass and toast. 10 years ago, I was monster pretending to be man, convinced that power meant isolation, that caring meant weakness, that my father's way was the only way. Then African woman stumbled into my alley and destroyed every wall I'd built around my heart. I didn't destroy your walls, Ashanti corrected, raising her own glass. I walked through them without knowing they existed. You're the one who chose to let me in, who chose to transform, who chose love over everything else. Their daughter, old enough to attend adult celebrations now, made face at their romance. You two are embarrassing. Everyone knows love story. Can we skip to dessert? They laughed, the sound filling penthouse that had once felt like prison, that had evolved into home, that now held life and love and chosen family. The K-drama fantasy Ashanti had chased to Korea had transformed into something more realistic and more magical. Not perfect meet cute but messy complicated love. Not chaebol prince but reformed criminal. Not simple romance but partnership forged through danger and prejudice and every obstacle that should have destroyed them. But love, they'd learned, wasn't about avoiding obstacles. Love was about choosing someone despite obstacles, standing beside them when everyone said it couldn't work, building something good from impossibility. Love was African woman and Korean crime lord proving that bloodline mattered less than choice, that family was what you built rather than what you inherited, that sometimes stumbling into wrong alley led to exactly right person. And as Seoul's lights glittered beyond their windows, as their daughter chattered about upcoming school play, as Woo-jin's hand found Ashanti's with familiar certainty, they knew with absolute conviction that every danger they'd faced, every prejudice they'd overcome, every moment of fear and doubt had been worth it. Because they'd built something that would outlast them. Love that conquered tradition, family that transcended bloodline, future that proved impossible things happened every day to people brave enough to choose them. The end of their story was really just another beginning. Their daughter growing into her own power, perhaps younger siblings arriving to complicate their family further, Woo-jin's continued transformation from what he was into what he chose to be, Ashanti's ongoing navigation of belonging to 2 worlds simultaneously. But whatever came next, they'd face it together. The lost tourist and reformed monster, the woman who chased K-drama fantasy and found something better, dangerous, complicated, beautiful reality called love.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, besties.